Hey Dad, look at those clouds. Aren't they beautiful? Isn't God's creation awesome? This is an example of a conversation I would have with my father as we were on our short road trip to see my mom, who was recovering in a healthcare facility close to home. You see, Dad was suffering from dementia, and the cloud comments were an attempt to focus his attention on something that was familiar, something that was beautiful, and something that God has created. Our short trip to see my mom usually took place in the late afternoon. This was a time of day when sundown syndrome could enhance the symptoms of Alzheimer's, the form of dementia my father was experiencing. My thoughts were that if my father's attention wasn't directed towards something simple and easy to see, his mind could wander into an intensified state of confusion, anxiousness, and various behavior changes could occur. When a family member starts to experience dementia, the immediate family usually becomes the first line of caregivers. In fact, once the family starts to get educated on the disease, they might realize that the individual who's experiencing the disease has been displaying symptoms for some time. Dementia is not a single disease in itself, but a general term used to describe various symptoms of cognitive decline, such as impairment of memory, communication, and thinking. Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. I have to think that everyone who experiences Alzheimer's experiences it differently. And the family members or the caretakers, when dealing with the individual, have different experiences. Yet in general, the symptoms are the same. There are a variety of basic strategies that we learn to help us cope with the disease. Exhibiting patience, that is, positive endurance, is a key to creating a positive experience for all parties involved, victims and caregivers. Learn to be a patient listener. Other strategies include reviewing family albums, reading familiar stories, or providing simple repetitive games. All these strategies can work, but I was looking for some strategies that involved Christian principles, like hiding the Word of God in your heart, or the fact that the Word of God is living and powerful, and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the dividing of the soul and the spirit. So, I decided to create some prayer cards for my dad to help focus his attention on things that were wholesome, family-oriented, and spiritual. After purchasing some 5x7 index cards, a hole puncher, and a couple Sharpies and some O-rings to hold the cards together, I proceeded to make the cards. The goal was to create prayer cards that were easy to read, that means they had large print, that incorporated basic prayer concepts, that used biblical language, in other words, verses from the Bible, and involved all the family members by name. The cards you just saw were my actual cards with some prayer concepts and biblical principles. I'm going to show you a couple examples of how I would make a prayer card for family members. Lord, I'm praying for my daughter Mary and her husband Eric, that you would protect them, their marriage, and the children John and Matt. I pray that they stand fast in the liberty by which Christ has made us free, knowing that the grace of God is sufficient for us all. Here's another example of a card that I would make. I left the spaces open so you could put the names in of your family members. Lord, I'm praying for my son Joe and his wife Amanda. Protect their marriage and their children. And then we would name the children by name. Susan and Tom and Charles and Emily. Sanctify them, Lord, for we know this is the will of God our Father. May you find their hearts and minds thankful toward you and your provisions in their life. I typed up and posted for the rest of the video a copy of the prayer cards that I made for my father. Once I made them, I just set them by his chair in the living room where he spent most of his time so that family members could read them. He could read them, or even his grandkids could come in and read them to him. I have to tell you that he never refused when I asked him if he wanted to read the prayer cards. The conversation about family members between the cards was always precious and enlightening and positive. Sometimes we would get out the Bible afterwards and read a few stories from the Bible. It was a difference maker in his life, and that's why I wanted to share them. If you have a family member or a friend who's in a nursing home or a vet who's in a vet's home, and their prayer life isn't or can't be what maybe it could be, the idea of making prayer cards specific for their family members and specific for them could be a great idea to help their spirituality in their daily lives. I have to tell you too that my family members mentioned that this was a difference maker. It's much better to have peaceful evenings after reading the cards than evenings of anxiousness and confusion, all heightened by the sundown syndrome. So I hope you enjoyed this video. In order to follow up here at the end of the video, I just want to let you know that I put a verse on there for my father. One verse on the back of the card. And I left the back of the cards open for anybody to write their thoughts down if they wanted to. But we got in the car one day and later on in the week, and Dad looks out the window and he says, "Aren't those clouds beautiful?" And I have to say, "Dad, they're beautiful."